DACA and the roller coaster that it's been over the last couple of months. Hopefully, the information we'll be providing is going to consist of the latest updates. We never know these days, but we'll see what we can do. You'll notice tonight we're doing the video in English. I know lately when I'm doing the videos, they're in Spanish, but last week we recorded a pretty extensive video over DACA in Spanish. And so feel free to check that video out if you prefer information in Spanish. If you prefer to ask your questions in Spanish, please feel free to leave those in the comments. We'll get to those questions still here during the video, but just wanted to make sure we got the information out to everybody. So hopefully this will be informative. If I figure this out correctly, we're going to be joined here in just a second by my colleague and partner, Zoe Naylor. At our firm, she's the one who's handling most of the issues with DACA, and see if we can get her connected here in just a minute. Zoe, you there? I can hear you, but yeah, I don't see you either. Let's give this a try.
Okay, there we
Awesome.
are. There's
Okay.
an extra box, but that's okay.
We tried this out earlier and it took us a while to figure it out, but here we go. So I guess just before we get started on the discussion about DACA, I'll just introduce myself first, then Zoe, have you go ahead and introduce yourself as well. For anyone who doesn't know us, my name's Nathan Bogart, and Zoe and I are partners in the Fayetteville, Arkansas firm of Bogart, Small, and Naylor. We primarily take cases in immigration and criminal defense. I personally primarily take cases involving deportation defense and other immigration type of litigation, filing lawsuits against the immigration agencies, handling appeals, representing people in detention centers, things of that nature. And Zoe, I'll let you kind of describe what you do with us.
Yeah, so I'm Zoe Naylor. I've been working with Nathan for the last 2 years here with the Bogart name. I mostly do what we call the affirmative cases or transactional cases. And so that means that when you're hopefully not in deportation proceedings, but there may be some immigration options for you, things like DACA, things like marriage to a US citizen or a permanent resident, things like humanitarian cases, what we call affirmative asylum or naturalization citizenship. That's where I come in and help. And so I have a extra passion for this because I went through the citizenship process myself about 7 years ago. And so I find it really exciting to help people make this their home, just like I've chosen to.
Great. Thank you. So tonight we're going to be talking about DACA, right? Mm-hmm. It's been insane.
Yeah. Well, when we planned this, we were hoping to have a very different type of video.
Yes. Yeah, we planned on doing this Monday, I guess, and we were going to be talking about sending in initial applications, applying for travel permits, what we call advanced parole. Yeah, I guess it was that same day. I can't remember anymore. All the days are the same, but yeah, it was about the same day that we found out that maybe that's not the best advice anymore.
No. So the Department of Homeland Security, their acting director, Wolf, came out with a sort of surprise memo. Now, of course, the Supreme Court decision on DACA was a victory and so wonderful that they continued to have the program. However, under this administration, we all anticipated something may end up changing. It just happened a bit quicker than maybe a lot of us had previously thought. And so what this memo did, the big unfortunate piece, is that they've stated, at least so far, that initial new DACA applications won't be allowed anymore. Now, we do anticipate this will be litigated, so maybe next week we'll have different news for you. But as of right now, unlike a week ago, when Nathan gave his video in Spanish, when we thought we could start applying for new DACAs, that has been stopped at this point. So right now, anyone who's filed initial DACAs, they will be returned, and we cannot file any new ones. They won't, USCIS, the Immigration Customs Service Agency, will not be accepting new DACAs right now.
Right. Not going to be accepting them at all. And what about travel permits?
Yeah, so they had sort of been stopped for a long time anyways, what we call advanced parole documents. So it's permission to travel outside the country and come back in with that entry. Generally, we haven't seen them be allowed for the last several years under this administration, but this memo did specifically direct that those advanced paroles are not allowed except for exceptional circumstances. So we're not, exceptional circumstances are why you should hire a lawyer to help you with advanced parole, because we don't quite know what immigration is going to do in those cases yet. It may be, a family member's death or serious illness could potentially reach to that level. But we haven't had any test cases yet to really see what this administration is calling exceptional circumstances.
Sure. So the memo doesn't really define exceptional circumstances at all.
No, it leaves it open, which in some ways, leaves a small window there for some people out there who maybe before it was not really an option. They just routinely were being denied. And so now maybe there are some exceptions where there may be some exceptional circumstance to allow someone to leave the country and come back without risking that DACA status. Remember, you do have to apply for this ahead of time. You can't just leave the country and then expect to still have your DACA status when you come back in. But so the administration leaves a little door open there, but it sounds like it may be quite difficult. Unlike before, again, when we thought maybe we'd been able to really open the door for a lot of people to get that entry stamp.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this administration in general has been a little bit more stringent, a little more difficult when it comes to things. I know that the number of requests that we get for additional evidence have gone up tremendously over the last 3.5 years. And so I an undefined term like exceptional circumstances, I really have no clue, how they're going to do that. So I think that it's going to unfortunately be something that we just have to learn from experience. If someone really does have an emergency, maybe not now because of COVID, but if someone does have an emergency where they have to leave the country, then we'll try that and I guess see what the government's definition is going to end up being.
Yeah, it's going to be, again, have to have some test cases out there first to see what they end up doing.
Yeah, for sure. So we're talking about, DACA tonight. Feel free to leave questions in the comment section. Also feel free to give the video a share or to just let us know where you're watching from. If you don't feel comfortable leaving questions in the comment section because it's public and people can see who you are, that's certainly fine. You can always send us a message through the firm's page, and that would be completely confidential. We'd be more than happy to address any issues that are of interest to anybody else. So you mentioned that there might be lawsuits filed. What makes you think that lawsuits are going to fall out of all this?
Yeah, so this memo seems to sort of go against the spirit of what the Supreme Court said. And that's sort of the problem is, the Supreme Court said that while the administration may have the power to end the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrival program, they didn't do it in the right way. And so that means when they did it through things like this, through a memo, instead of having a public comment period and doing it the, sort of the proper bureaucratic way that you end a program that's going to affect this many lives. And so essentially what DHS has done is just sent out another memo. And sort of it seems to be like they're just ignoring what the Supreme Court has said and saying, well, we're going to clarify some things, but we're still not going to adhere to essentially reinstating the DACA program until the Trump administration, if they choose, do close the program, but in the proper measures and the proper channels that they should have done in the first place if they really wanted to end the program.
Yeah, and that's been kind of one of the issues with DACA from the beginning, right? I mean, I think that the big topics that have been discussed in politics or by talking heads on the news have been whether or not the program is constitutional or not. But when it's come to a lot of this litigation, whether it be the program's announcement all the way back in 2012 or the termination of the program in 2017, it's really just been boring lawyer procedural stuff, right? It's been, did the Obama administration in 2012 follow the Administrative Procedures Act? Did they follow it again in 2014 when they tried to expand the program? And did the Trump administration follow the Administrative Procedures Act when they canceled the program? And of course, the answer most recently in June was no, they haven't. And I think that this memo in general is sort of an attempt to try and fix that. They're targeting the classes of people that from their point of view have not really relied on the program up to this point. Initial applicants and people who would be applying for advanced parole, travel permits. It said these are benefits that have not been available now for about 3 years. So certainly no one's been relying on them. What about people who have DACA? What's the situation for them in renewing?
Yeah, well, that sort of goes again on that reliance. The government seems to want to continue to show people that, this program is going to be temporary. We don't, from the administration perspective, we want to wind this down. And so typically, if you had DACA, you would have a 2-year work permit. And so every 2 years, you'd have to renew your DACA permission, and then you would renew your work permit with the same application. They've changed that to 1 year. So even if you have just sent it out, it includes those pending applications as well. And so anyone who has a pending DACA application or is about to mail one out, instead of having that usual 2-year work permit, it's going to be 1 year. And so, of course, the biggest downside is first the timing. Of course, with COVID, everything in immigration has just slowed down. And so even when you get that receipt notice, it says on it, your employer is supposed to allow you to work for 180 days or whatever it says on it. But often employers, they want to see what the work card says, or the DMV when you renew a license. They sometimes don't understand what the actual piece of paper says.
Right.
And so cause a lot of hassle is the bigger thing. And then the cost. It means that instead of every 2 years, you pay $495. It's every year now. You're going to have to spend that money, maybe pay lawyers to come help you do that as well. And so it's just more of another barrier, another way to just, get in sort of people's way for something that it really just doesn't make that much sense to have them do every year.
No, not at all. And I think that you make some great points there, because it's not just the cost of renewing DACA now every year, as opposed to how it used to be 2 years. $495 is a lot of money. I think it's a lot of money to most people. But the government's talking about raising those fees. Certainly they're talking about a 10% raise across all their costs to deal with the falling numbers of immigrant benefit applications they've been receiving, due in part to the pandemic. But like you pointed out, I mean, you've got to go renew your driver's license every year. That's a cost. You might have to pay an attorney now every year. That's a cost. You may temporarily lose your job if everything doesn't match up and you go a period of time without a current work permit. There's all kinds of problems now that's creating people. And I wonder if maybe that's not where the lawsuits in the future will be a little bit more successful, because people have been relying on that program to last for 2 years, and now they can't rely on that.
Yeah, and especially in the middle of a pandemic, it's like pretty disheartening to see, people who are providing for their U.S. citizen children and perhaps their U.S. citizen spouses, if we want to look at it from that perspective, but they are providing for their families, in the middle of a pandemic, and now we're going to increase the burden on them and their families to jump through more hoops, pay more fees so that they can try to keep having an income so their family doesn't have to rely on the government.
Oh yeah, it's total. It's not good.
Yeah.
So where do you see this going? What's your opinion on the inevitable lawsuits?
Yeah, well, I think one of the reasons this memo seemed to come out this time period is because then the Trump administration doesn't have to really make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, they likely knew. I think I saw an article where they admitted that they anticipated lawsuits from this memo. And so they may not be determined before November. And
Right.
so it really means that, this election is again, just like we thought before, going to have a big impact on people with DACA status. I think if this administration does win the election, then there are likely to see perhaps more steps taken in this direction to end the program. I think if perhaps, Democratic presumptive nominee Biden wins, under President Obama's administration is where we saw this program begin. And so I would assume, and what I've read would suggest that he would go ahead and rescind this memo and perhaps go ahead and try to seek meaningful action. Of course, it would have been nice if Congress had done something. But with a pandemic on their minds between now and November, I don't think DACA is going to be at the top of their priority list.
Yeah, probably not. And I think that kind of hits the nail right on the head. And that's really been one of the biggest problems with DACA from the beginning. Is it's always been somewhat of a hastily put together temporary solution for the underlying problem, which is that Congress will just simply not act on this issue. And I think it really goes to show that it's not just important who we elect as president. It's important who we elect as our representatives, as our senators, and other offices as well, because those are the people who are going to be actually creating and passing legislation. And we need to be paying a little bit more attention to that as well. We need people who are going to take the issue seriously, because while it may not seem urgent to them today, what happens is that turns into 5, 10, 15 years down the road, the problem's still not solved. And people continue to suffer. And so, it's a presidential election year. And I think that, everyone's going to be paying attention to who the next president's going to be. But we need to be paying a lot of attention as well to who we're voting for senator, for representative, and all down the ballot, and not just, care about Trump. He's awful, but, we need more change than just him.
It is. And it's, and the silly thing is, when we look at statistics, I think I saw something today, like 75% of Americans support this program. There's an NPR article, and I think it also listed that statistic in New York Times. 75%, support this. And so, while it started as a President Obama and more of a Democratic issue, it's an issue that crosses both party lines, that we say that, look, maybe we don't agree, depending on your politics, how people come to the United States, but generally people agree that if you were brought here as a kid, you didn't have a choice in that matter. And so we want to give you an opportunity here because, America is, the American dream, and you can come from, nothing and become something. And so if you're a kid brought here, then we want to give you a chance of the American dream, right? These people are called dreamers because this is their country. And if we don't have DACA, they might not have anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I think politically it's a layup. And I think one of the most frustrating things about this program, especially under this administration, is see how they constantly go against even what the majority of the public wants when it comes not just the program, but the people who benefit from it. But it's all politics. It's a game to this administration, and it's I don't think it's going to end well as long as they're there. So I kind of agree with you. I think the lawsuits are coming. I'm kind of surprised one hasn't been filed yet. We've got almost a full work week at least, anyways, with this new announcement, and at least last I checked, one hadn't been filed just quite at this time. There are several pending lawsuits about the attempt to terminate the program from 2017 that are pending. Last week in our video, we talked a lot about the lawsuit that's pending in one of the federal courts in Maryland, and that was the court that had actually issued an order telling the administration to start accepting initial applications, and that was what changed my mind last week about advising people to file initial applications. Was that court order? I'd held off on it until then, and we know that there were arguments last week as well in another court that's been considering this issue. And so it's possible that it'll be addressed through some of those pending cases, but certainly there will likely be other lawsuits that are filed. I am somewhat pessimistic about it. I don't know. That being said, I was very cautious about the lawsuit going up to the Supreme Court, and was pleasantly surprised that the Supreme Court came down in the decision that it came down in. But unfortunately, the Supreme Court did kind of leave a roadmap to the administration that any idiot could follow and end the program, probably without consequence. And my biggest fear is that this memo does somewhat follow that roadmap. And if it does, then those lawsuits may not end up being successful. But like you said, it's not likely that anything really gets resolved until after the election. And so for the time being, I think this is kind of where we're at. So based on this memo, how would you advise people moving forward? I guess we can start with people who had the program. Should they renew, and what should be their next steps?
Yeah, so if you're already in the program, the risks of giving your information to the government under the program have already happened. So I would, if you are already part of the program, I would recommend, continuing to be part of it. It gives you that deferred action status, which means, the government is going to defer any action as to your status for the time being. And it allows most people to have a work permit so they can work in the United States. You can use that work permit to get a driver's license. So there are a lot of benefits to the program. So if you have it, just make sure you're renewing in your renewal window. And I would suggest you continue to renew it. It's just a shame it will only be for that 1 year now. And so you will have to renew it more often. Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, the election could change everything, and that's kind of the hope. Like you said, if the presumptive Democratic nominee wins, I agree with you. I think everything I'm reading indicates that this program this memo would probably be rescinded. This program would probably return to a pre-September 2017 status. In which case, if that were to happen, then you're not going to have to renew it every year.
No, and then the hope would be that we would actually even expand it at that point.
Exactly. So, we'll see how that works out. And I would agree with you too. I mean, if you're within 150 days of your work permit expiring, do it. I mean, your information is already in the government's hands. They already know who you are. You're not at, I think, further risk of renewing it. In fact, you're probably at much higher risk of if you don't renew it. And unfortunately, in the last 3.5 years, we have had clients who found their way into immigration court proceedings, sometimes even being detained, who had DACA at some point, and either because they didn't comply with the terms of the program or because they didn't renew, had lost that benefit and had to fight. And some of them, the fight continues. Others, unfortunately, received removal orders and have been returned to a country that they didn't really know. So from my perspective, seeing that personally, it's a crappy situation, but please still renew it and definitely do that if you're within those 150 days.
Yep. Yeah, I would agree with that. Unfortunately, if you were hoping, if you were maybe under 15 back before this program was ended, and you were hoping now you could apply for something, unfortunately, I just think right now, at least, there's, you can't apply. They've very specifically announced in the memo they're just going to send the packet back. And so there's not really anything that can be done at this point. If you don't have DACA and you want to apply, you think you qualify, unfortunately, this memo it's going to prevent you from doing it right now.
Yes, I would also agree with that advice. I've heard some contrary opinions out there. There have been some people who thought maybe if you go ahead and apply one of these new lawsuits that gets filed, or one of the pending lawsuits ends up enjoining this memo, then maybe you're going to be one of those people who's protected. But I just think for me it's just a bridge too far. At least at this moment, your information is not in the hands of this ridiculous administration, and and you're going to be at least not in a worse situation because of that. But I just don't see a path forward towards an approval, and so I don't see any value in spending $500 and attorney's fees and all the other costs that are associated with DACA in renewing that right now. I just think it's too dangerous.
Yeah. Now, there might still be other immigration options for you. There's a lot of different, especially if you marry a US citizen. If you are, a juvenile, sometimes there are other options for you. And so sometimes it's still worth visiting to see if you might qualify for something else. But just DACA won't be one of them.
Correct. Yeah. We haven't canceled any consultations with people who set up a consultation to talk to us about the program. We're still talking to people who have questions and kind of walking them through and seeing if they maybe qualify for something else. But I'm not going to be advising anybody to apply for right now, unfortunately. Yeah. So any other thoughts or concerns you'd like to discuss?
Not really, dealing with DACA. If anyone watching has questions out there, I think we've done a thorough job of covering it all.
Sure. Yeah, I think so too. And we don't really have a lot of questions tonight, and that's fine. If you want to leave questions, please feel free to do so. We can come back and answer those in writing afterwards. Or like I said, you're always invited to send us a private message through the firm's Facebook page, and we'll go through that as well in answering those questions. I don't typically get too political on these videos, and it's not really the part of someone just left a comment, and I agree 100%. But I won't address that comment right now. But yes, those are my thoughts exactly, and that's exactly what I was about to just talk about. So I don't usually like to get too political, but I've been thinking a lot about it more and more lately, and thinking more about this, the DACA program, specifically, and we got to change this administration, right? We've got to make sure that there's a change this fall, and so I just encourage anybody who's watching or who feels the same way to get involved in any way you can to make sure we see a change. If you're a U.S. citizen, vote. If you're a lawful permanent resident, file to be a citizen if you're eligible to do that. And then if your citizenship gets approved on time, register to vote and go vote. If you are not able to apply for citizenship, if you're a lawful permanent resident, you're just not eligible, or if you are undocumented, or you participate in a temporary program like DACA, or a temporary employment visa, or temporary protected status, or anything else, you still have a right to express your opinion, to exercise influence with your friends and families, to volunteer for campaigns, to volunteer your time, drive people to the polls. I don't care.
Just make sure you're
right. Yes. Do everything you can to help out, because it's not going to get better. And I think that's the general consensus under this administration. We've seen what the last 3.5 years were like. We've seen what's happened if people don't get out and vote. And I think that, it's incumbent upon all of us to do our part to get that change taken care of. But yeah, thanks, Zoe, so much. And thanks, everyone, for tuning in tonight. I hope we were able to answer your questions. Feel free to leave any others, and we'll get to those as soon as we can. But for now, everyone, have a good night. We'll be back next week.